Welcome back. We're going to look at the cosine law today, but before we begin, we're going to look at a quick review. What is an acute angle? It's an angle that's less than 90 degrees. What's an obtuse angle? It's an angle which is between 90 and 180 degrees. And what's the equation for the Pythagorean theorem? These are things which you should know going into this lesson. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, or c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. And we're going to find out that cosine is just a modification of the Pythagorean theorem. We're just going to add a little bit to it. Quick review. How would you calculate the value of x given the following triangles? Right now, if I were to look at this, here's what I know. I know that I could use sine law to solve this, but I can circle this pair, and I can circle this pair, and I could use x over sine of the angle 53 degrees is equal to 12 over sine 81 degrees, and so x is equal to 12 times sine of 53 degrees over times over sine 81 degrees. And if I were to pull out my trusty calculator, we'd find that it is equal to 9.466. Now, the other thing I would like to point out here is that, yeah, we've got these, but look at these other triangles below. Can we circle two pairs of an angle and side length? I can circle this one, but I can't circle 10 because I don't have C, and I can't circle the 13 because I don't have angle A. So sine law will not work here. What about this one? I can circle this as a pair, but I cannot circle anything else. And so what you're going to learn in this lesson is that if you have three sides, side, side, and side, you will be able to find an angle using sine law. Actually, that'll be in the next lesson. And if you have side, angle, and then side, then you can use cosine law to find the other side length over here. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So questions for thought. How do we determine the value of x for the following triangles? And that's where we have lesson 2, using cosine law to find the side lengths of a triangle. And we're in unit 6, which is the trigonometry of acute triangles. It's important to note that it doesn't really matter that we're dealing with acute triangles when using cosine law, because cosine will always give us, it doesn't depend on it being an obtuse or an acute angle. You'll get the correct measure whenever you find it, whenever you do cosine inverse of something. Unlike sine, where sine inverse of a ratio will always give you the acute angle back. And that's the ambiguous case. There is no ambiguous case with cosine. The learning goal here is to determine the measures of sides and angles in acute triangles using cosine law. Sample problem in triangle ABC. A is this, B is this, and so on and so forth. We can determine the side length. Here's cosine law. You could represent in many different ways. Just to be consistent with how I've labeled it in the first lesson, we've got triangle ABC determined by the vertices, where angle A is here, and across from angle A is the side length A, and we represent it as a lowercase a. Here's angle B, lowercase b is the side length. Here's angle C, capital C, and side length is C. And so here's what's going on with this. So this is essentially Pythagorean theorem here, and this stuff on the right is the addition. So c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine c. And whenever I write this out, I always like to, I actually don't memorize the formula. You'll get it just by remembering that these numbers are going to repeat here and here, and that this angle corresponds to the opposite side of this side length. And the one thing I can say is the more you practice this, the better it will get, or the easier it will be. And I've done it in the past where I've done a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of whatever the angle would have been. And honestly, it's a lot of work to write it out, and it's not very time efficient. So here's our first question. Determine the value of b given this triangle. Here we've got side, angle, side. We know that we're going to be using cosine for this, and we're going to start with the angle that we're looking, or sorry, the side length that we're looking for. B squared is equal to the other two sides that we have, that makes the sandwich, 10 squared plus 13 squared minus 2 times these numbers repeated, 10 and 13, times cosine of the angle that's across from this value, which is 80 degrees. This is where we look in our calculator, and we're going to find out that, I don't want to do that just yet, b squared is going to be equal to this 223.85, and I find that for the most part students struggle with this portion of finding our answer because they're doing something not quite right in their calculators. So just be very clear that you get this answer. If I was doing this on a test, I might actually skip directly to this answer at the very bottom, where b is 14.96, and not show these intermediate steps. But because this is a lesson, I'm showing you what the numbers are to make sure that if you've got a problem with your calculator, that you know where you're going wrong with it. So b squared is equal to 223.85. The opposite operation of square is square root, so this becomes the square root of 223.85. b is equal to 14.96. Here's example 2. I encourage you to pause the video at this point to try it yourself. That's not what I wanted. So, what do I want to find? This is side, angle, side, which means I should be able to use cosine law. I'm going to start with what I want to find. C squared is equal to the other side that I have, 19.7 squared plus 15.32 squared minus 2 times those numbers repeated, 19.7 times 15.32 times cosine, called cosine law for a reason, of the side across from this angle that we want to find, cosine 30 degrees. Make sure that looks like a 15. It's harder to write with this than you think. Putting this all into our calculator, we get c squared is equal to 100.05. Again, this is an intermediate step because it's a lesson. I would usually skip right to c equals square root 100.05. So c is going to be equal to 10 if it's rounded off. And that's it for this lesson. There's not much more to it. We've got our classwork homework questions. Practice makes perfect. I strongly recommend that you do not just memorize the formula. Application of it, as I've shown you, is going to allow you to understand and memorize this formula, or at least use it without having to memorize A, B, and C and where they all go. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your studies.